buddy, put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That's just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the program and welcome to the 6 o'clock club. If you are up this early in the morning and ready to go, you are an official member of the unofficial club. That's what you don't get anything but bragging rights and maybe that feeling of moral superiority by being up this early and ready to go, figuring out what's going on in around the state and around the country here this morning. Welcome to the program, and thanks for coming in and joining us. Wow, a heck of a weekend for many folks out there in Western Alaska. Some unexpected twists and turns, Mother Nature throwing some new stuff here on everything, and we're going to get into that here this morning with some of the headlines from around the state, and we're going to get a chance to talk to some folks who are actually there on the ground in Western Alaska. It has been an interesting weekend and quite terrifying for some of those folks, and so hopefully your thoughts and prayers are continuing for the folks out in the villages. Some of the videos, and I don't know how many of you have been watching this or not over the weekend, but it was pretty amazing to see what Mother Nature was doing out there on the West Coast. We're going to talk about that as well. Coming up, Willie Keppel is going to be joining us from Quinnahock out near Bethel, and he's got some, he's going to be calling in here and reporting to us on what it was like and what things, what was going on out there. In hour two, we're going to be joined by Representative Kevin McCabe, who's going to come on with us and discuss his latest article in the Alaska Watchman, which is going to delineate a plan for rebuilding and fixing our failing school systems. He had this piece came out yesterday. I guess it was yesterday. We're going to talk with him about that, and we'll see what he has to say about that here this morning in hour two, and we'll have that discussion with him. But first, let's dive into some of the news and things that are going on. Initially, this storm that was coming in, the remnants of Typhoon Halong was initially thought that it was going to head on a more northerly track. The storm was expected, according to Joshua Rybale, who's a forecaster for the National Weather Service, said that Sunday the storm was expected to move towards the Seward Peninsula and continue up the coast. Initially, they had expected that it was going to head again north of the Pribilof Islands and reach Nome before dawn on Sunday. But unfortunately, late Saturday, the storm turned eastward, reducing the winds and the water as it continued to smash against the then western coast of Alaska. And it was pretty amazing. Like I said, if you've seen the videos, if you've watched what's going on, a lot of the Facebook lives, it's been pretty astonishing. Whole communities have been flooded Homes have been lifted off of their foundations and drifted. In fact, one of the residents of Quilinguk spoke with KYUK while he was still trapped inside of his house. He said his house just lifted up and started floating down the edge of a small creek before coming to rest against a bridge. The officials are saying that rescue efforts are underway as the floodwaters are starting to recede in these communities. The National Guard is on its way out there, and Governor Dunleavy has amended a disaster declaration that was issued earlier in the week to include areas of the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta that were affected by the storm. Some of the hardest hit communities included Kipnuk, Quilinguk, and Napiak. And I have to say that it was interesting because I was gaming with some of my Alaska friends on Saturday night. And one of my friends lives in Tuksuk Bay. And he said, hey guys, this storm is really getting kind of crazy. And he said the winds are pretty unbelievable. And he's right. Tuksuk Bay, 100-mile-an-hour winds. That was peak winds. 100 miles an hour in Tuksuk. St. George had 92. Tunanak had 84. Kipnuk was 79. Akitan Island, 72. Aniak was 67. It was just, kind of crazy high-speed winds with coastal flood warnings remaining in effect throughout the evening and an advisory on the Kuskokwim River that remains in effect through this morning. It's been pretty crazy. The last 2 days, man, just pretty crazy. Now, so far, no reported deaths, although there are some people that are still missing. They have still some people who are unaccounted for. And I want to kind of get a feel for what's going on. Let's go over to the phones. Willie Keppel, who is out in Quinnahock, joins us this morning to discuss this and to give us his experience. He's out in Quinnahock, which is just outside of Bethel. Bethel's experienced some serious flooding. And let's see what Willie has to say. Can you hear me, Willie? Hold on a second, Willie. Willie, I'm going to have to call you back. My thing is not. Hold on a second. This is the technical aspect. Let me call you back, Willie. Hold on a second here. We're going to fix this. This was sorry. He called me, and turns out that I needed to call him to make it all work. You can't make this stuff up. Let's try this again here. We'll go out here and get Willie on the phone. There we go, and we'll get him. Call in. There we go. Call in there. All right. We're going to get Willie on board. You there, Willie?
Good morning.
Good morning, Willie.
Yes.
How are you doing out there in Western Alaska? Kind of a crazy weekend, huh?
Yeah, 40 years out here. This is a pretty doggone wild one for sure. I've been through some pretty bad ones out here, but this one was the worst as far as structural damage to me. I'm sitting in Quinnahock, and we're 80 some miles south of Bethel, right on the coast of the Bering Sea. Bethel sits inland 60 miles up the Kuskokwim River. And most of the villages have really got hammered really bad. We all got hammered, but they sit so low on the flat tundra. They're due west of Bethel, mostly headed out to Nelson Island area. You're just mentioning Tuksuk Bay. That's all night. That's the Nelson Island area out there. I'm looking at friends that are in Night Mute, which has a great big hill behind it, and you have to come inland on rivers to get to Night Mute. You have to go inland on rivers to get to about most of these places anyway. Quingillanuk, Kongiganuk, Kipnuk, all of those. There's river adventures to get into those places, but they're all flat, but the delta out here is nothing but one interconnecting lake, pretty much. I mean, if you had to walk to Bethel in the summertime, it'd probably take you a whole lifetime, or you better be an Olympic swimmer, you know.
Right.
It's flat, and it got hammered, and it. Right here in my house at this time yesterday morning, I was inside the house I'm in right now. I was up to my knees in water, halfway up the toilet stove in the cabin here. And it picked my house up and swung my house 90 degrees. My windows used to face due north towards Bethel. Now I'm facing due east. It swung me that 90 degree on my pad. And what had me anchored is kind of my porch that was attached to the house. I had a pretty big porch set of steps going up, and I kept building gravel pad just so you could get away from the floods and stuff, park your four-wheeler there and keep your feet dry to ride the trail back out to get to the road system to go back to the village. And that and the power line on that one, on the one corner of the house right there, held everything. And so it's like, the feeling was, I don't know if you guys are familiar with boating where you have sandbars in the rivers, but every once in a while you hit a sandbar, and that's where you sit till the next tide comes in. And the house is shaking, the wind's shaking, and all of a sudden you start to get this little quivery feeling underneath your feet, and the tide's coming in, picking your boat up, and you're going to escape pretty quick,
Right.
And anyway, that was the feeling I had in the house, but it was so dark and the wind was just hammering us. It was 60 some miles an hour hammering on the side of us, and I could hear things banging around out there. I knew this was not good. And my friend called me earlier about 2:30 in the morning, and he goes, "How are you doing down there?" Because the villages, for the most part, this village has the majority of the village is higher up, and there's only one side of the village that's down lower, going towards the river with the bay out in front yet. But they were getting hammered in there real bad, and the water was coming in. So he called down here, and I says, "Oh, I think I'm doing fine," at 2:30 in the morning. He says, "Man, the water's up. We tried to drive down that road, down the road to get to your trail down there." He says, "It's over the road." I says, "Well, let me check." And I opened the door, and the water was in the porch, but it hadn't quite got up to the step to come in the house. And I go, "This is bad. That's like 4 foot of water to get in,
Yeah.
And so there's where we sat here, But everything in my yard is totally demolished. All my cabins came off the pilings, floated around, got smashed up. 7 connexes I have, everything stacked in a connex got picked up. 4 foot of water in my shop. Everything just goes to the floor and floats around and gets destroyed, So I'm all right, myself, my dogs, everything. That's all I really worry about. And I'm good, But across the bay is a whole different ordeal. Where we're at, I can look across the bay and I can see the lights at Tuntuliak over there. On a real good night, you can see the airport beacon over there across the bay. It's about 30 miles, 40 miles maybe, I don't know. But anyway, those folks over there just really got hammered. And that's a really flat area. Hardly even any willow brush grows on it. And they ended up with houses. Some of the houses got picked up off the foundations, and the tide and the winds, with the winds blowing it, blew one house anyway in particular I was looking at. They had it on a Google map, and it looked like it had blown inland across the tundra miles with the tide. And what this does, it besides the the damage, that's all replaceable. Human lives, we don't know yet whether anybody died. They're still missing half a dozen people or more right now. And one, cross your fingers and hope for the best in that department. That's the worst part that can happen in a flood or a disaster is human life. But it's going to bring up another round of heavy-duty conversation in the legislature, and I know we have legislators listening. I know there's legislative aides listening, and what's going to come up is a huge need for a fast supply of cash to fix a whole lot of problems to get these communities ready to be able to handle the blizzards that are coming off the coast of the Bering Sea out here in a real short order. And how they do that, I'm not certain.
Well, wait, let's stop for just a second there, Willie, because that's the problem. Here we are, mid-October, this huge flood. Everybody was just getting ready for winter. And now you're going to have people who are displaced, homes that are destroyed, probably most of them unlivable. And you're going to have, how the winter is coming. The winter is just around the corner. 2-3 weeks, we're talking about snow to stick. And like you said, blizzards. This is going to be a heavy problem for folks who are about to face, like you said, the depths of winter out there.
Well, yeah, and the problem doesn't just happen here. It goes all the way up to Kotzebue, too. Kotzebue is underwater before we were. They got hit with the first storm. And so we have this conversation that's going to have to happen. Are we going to do like we did over here in Newtalk and relocate a village to someplace else? Let's look at the cost. The cost, I've been watching this Newtalk move now for over 20 years. In fact, I first really started paying attention. I was living in Bethel, working for Connect Construction, and so we got barges on the river, and all of a sudden another barge shows up, and it's a U.S. Army Corps of Engineer barge, and it's got a crew, all in uniforms and everything. So I was talking to them, and they had this lieutenant, and this was like 20 some years ago, and she was a young lady, and we were having this conversation, and the Army was using the barge. The Corps of Engineers was using this as a training exercise to go up there and start logistically moving everything into Newtalk, moving things from Newtalk to the new location further up. And they were spending half their time stuck on sandbars out in the Bering Sea before they ever got close to Newtalk. It was quite the learning circle for those folks. But I was having this conversation, and the woman asked me, she says, the lieutenant asked me, what do you think about this? And I says, most everybody in this community right here, if they want to tell you the truth of what they think it's the stupidest thing you ever did. Why are we doing this? What's out there? And look at the costs, because the costs were projected clear back then to be $100 million at minimum, with $150 million, and there was only 20 residencies. So you sit there and you go, okay, you're going to build a brand new airport, you're going to build a brand new school, you're going to go up there, put in a washateria, a water plant, and probably pipe water and sewer if they're going all out. Plus you got to build the roads, everything else. So doggone well they're going to hit $150 million without blinking an eye. That's how government works. And you do the simple math, even at $100 million, 20 houses into $100 million, $4 million a house right there, just to put all the infrastructure together. And I'm going, this is dumb. Why don't you just go tell all those people, hey, look, you can live it out where you're at, or you can move right here to Bethel, where there's actually an economy and jobs and schools that have plenty of space for kids. And we'll build you a brand new house. We'll build you $1 million mansion, and you never have to make a payment. We'd have still walked away at $100 million for 20 households, saving $3 million per family by building them $1 million house, And this is the problem that the legislators are going to have to look at. I look at what Lyman Hoffman and the PFD thieves have done down there, which is to steal the PFD, which keeps people locked into the villages. How many of these people right now, if they were sitting with a family of 4 or family of 5 and had a $4,000 dividend per person in their hand, would be even thinking about much else other than packing up what's salvageable, getting on the next airplane, and flying to Bethel or Anchorage where there's opportunity?
Right.
Lyman and the boys know this.
Hold on, Willie. Yeah. We're coming up on a break here. We got to come back. We're going to come back with Willie Keppel, who's out in Quinnipiac near Bethel, talking about the effects of Typhoon Halong on the western coast of Alaska this morning. We'll be back with more of the Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show, because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, Willie Keppel is our guest. We are continuing here on the old radio program for just a moment. Let me fix this right here. And I'm just getting things squared away here for the station. Willie, this is, again, this has been part of the question that I think a lot of people have had over the years of, how do we help these folks without, busting the bank. And I think you make a valid point when you say by taking their PFD, we've done a lot to not help them in that regard. And that's they could have helped themselves in some ways.
Well, it's kept them isolated. And Bryce Edgman, Lyman Hoffman, Foster, Olson, they all know this. They don't want the village populations to shrink, because what happens, they already have areas that are not just huge, they're gigantic areas. Their House districts and Senate districts are so expansive that they don't want them bigger, and that's what would happen when if the population could get to some place that they could find a job and work, they would go. And they know this. Well, what happens when people start packing up and moving? It'll be the old people, guys like me that, hey, I'm pretty easy going. I've been doing this all my life. My kids are grown. They're on their own, live everywhere but here, and they realize the young population will pack up, which means that's the death of the villages. That's the death of their districts. I mean, their jobs are at risk, but not only that, you look at the total money foundation that comes out here. You have a state council, which would be second-class cities out here generally, in most villages, and you also have your federal councils, your IRAs, that all operate off of federal money. And you have to go back in time and take a look at how did these villages actually get here. They really didn't used to have this many villages out here until everybody saw what was coming down the line with Angska, and they realized, hey, that's our family fish camp. We can get a bunch of us go over here and start, and we will have a village, and we will have tens and tens and tens of millions pumped at us over the years, and we will be in control because we'll be the ones to run the councils. We can pay ourselves with federal tax dollars. And that's exactly what you have out here, and it's why the nepotism problem in these villages is horrendous. I mean, right here in Quinnahock, we have the Cleveland family. That's the family that I'm married into down here. And it's 100% nepotism in the village council down there, which is totally illegal in state and federal money. So to break this, the state doesn't even enforce the laws. The feds don't enforce the laws. They just keep shoveling money. So these people are not going to give up their little fiefdoms and kingdoms, and they're going to do everything they can. And people like Hoffman and Edgman do everything they can to keep them broke and keep them here so that the money keeps flowing and they still have their jobs in Juneau. This is part of the problem, and it's going to take somebody from out. I really believe it's going to take somebody from out here to be able to go in and counter the native voice that's from Western Alaska that wants to continue what we have going. You need someone strong enough to go in there and say, hey, this is pure malarkey. Things have to change. Canada went so far as to tell village communities that in the far north up there, hey, look, it's great. You want to be up there, that's fine, but we're done supporting you. You're on subsistence. You are on subsistence. And they cut the funding to a lot of these hugely remote, tiny villages. And some of them still survive. Some of them says, well, the free money rides over, and they move back into where there's opportunity for the kids. I mean, why have half-empty schools out here? And why be building $40 million schools when you don't have a population to support?
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke show.
All right, we're back. We're talking with Willie Keppel, who's out in Quinnahock near Bethel, about the effects of Typhoon Halong here on the West Coast. And Willie's had some pretty strong words here for what's taken place in the villages over the course of years. And you're talking about, what are the effects going to be, long term and what could potentially happen. But I guess I want to know right now, Willie, is what happens next? How do people get prepared for, how do people get prepared for the winter now that the situation is where it's at, where, I mean, basically homes are off foundations and they're, unlivable, et cetera, et cetera. What has to happen next in your mind?
Well, you're going to have some of these villages. This village won't be one. Quinnahock is in the clear, but I would say right now it's sounding like Kipnuk and Quigillinook are going to be the two biggest problems, and maybe even, I'm not sure because it's so far away, but Kotzebue up north probably looks like it just really got flooded too. Right now, everybody is using the school as their safety point. It's up on pilings. They build the schools on pilings, and it's the one place they can go. How they're going to go about putting people back into houses, I really truly don't know, because most houses are old, 30, 40-year-old HUD houses from decades ago. And they're falling apart in the first place. But the other half of that problem is that there are multiple layers of family living in the same houses. So a house with 2 bedrooms may have 3 generations living in that house with multiple kids and elders and everything else. So the houses that are still standing are totally full. You don't go to a village and rent a house. That never happens. There aren't houses for rent in villages, and there's no space available. So I'm not sure what the governor and his staff, or, and out here we have AVCP, Alaska Village Council Presidents, is a huge grant operation that's set up by the feds to handle the grants and all the programs that they can jointly administer for 50-some villages out here on the YK Delta. They were just having a big meeting because the storm season is now, and they just had a big meeting at ABCP. But I don't even know where they're going to move all these people, because I don't see anywhere near enough space to even move 2 villages even into Bethel. Bethel doesn't have that much space either. There's not much available rentable space there. So it's going to be a huge problem for the state. I don't know. Maybe the school becomes a communal living center for the rest of the year. I really don't know what the game plan's going to be. That's a higher pay grade than I am, sitting over here in a flooded out cabin in Quinhag.
Right. Well, and I think that's going to be the biggest challenge, is logistically dealing with with folks and trying to find them housing. I mean, again, whether you put the whole community up in the school for the winter, or maybe do they talk about moving some people out for the winter until they can come back in the spring and clean everything up? I mean, this is because, again, you only have 2-3 weeks until the solid snow comes in for the rest of the winter, and there's not a lot you can get done in that kind of time frame, especially from a logistical standpoint, trying to bring stuff out from other places to make it livable.
Well, yes, everything runs by barges, and right now the barge companies are playing their own sort of Russian roulette game with the ice on the rivers and ice in the bay. At this point right here, I'd throw a quick shout out to Jeff Coghill up there in the Nana. He has a 100-ton barge vessel license, and he spent years out here. And I worked with him when he was working for Knick. And Jeff's real familiar with all this up there in the Nana. So I imagine he's sitting there going, ooh, scratching his head trying to figure this one out too, like everybody else is going to be.
Yeah,
I don't know.
So, Willie, what are you gonna be doing? What's your plan here? As like you said, your cabin is now turned. I don't think you're going to be moving it here probably before too much longer, or anything else. What's your plan to make it through the winter here in Quinhag?
Well, we're looking at more storms and more ice and more flooding. So I really haven't made my mind up on whether to just pull the plug for the winter and wait till spring and move into Bethel maybe. I have a friend that he snowbirds to Thailand every year, and he's already told me, if you got to grab your dogs, go to my house, So I may end up doing that, or I may end up just going ahead and putting just a small 12 by 12 together. My problem right now is I'm out of Toyo heaters. I have 4 dead Toyo heaters that all been flooded out. No parts in the village, of course. Go rebuild any of them with gaskets and stuff. So, but I'm pretty used to hardcore living. I've been living without running water for over 20 years, so it's not a big deal to me. I mean, as long as I have heat and electricity, I'm pretty happy camper. I'm not hard to please. So I may end up probably just going ahead and patching up what I have right here, getting this cabin jacked up and getting it leveled up, and try to get a foundation back under it, and cross my fingers the ice don't jam and create another flood in March like we went through last year.
Right.
I don't know. All I know is everything I had, 4 foot of water in my shop, went over the top of my rolling toolboxes, every damn thing. All the snow machines we'd gone through tore apart all the way. Four wheelers drifted around in the yard. And so all of them are going to have to be gone through again. I mean, it's a nightmare of a job, an expensive job to do too, So I don't know. I just need to try to figure out how to get property from the corporations, which therein lies another problem. Most people don't realize on your side of the mountains, you think, I'm going to build a house. That's because you can buy property. Villages do not sell property. You see HUD houses in the village, they're sitting on corporation or village property. They never allow their property to be bought. You can't even buy a chunk of property. A villager cannot buy a chunk of property in 99% of the villages out here, unless they were mining villages up the Kuskokwim or something, like Antioch or Red Devil. You can buy property up there, but you go out on Nelson Island, you come down here, Good News Bay, anywhere else, you cannot buy property. And so all the federal monies that go in, putting the new HUD houses, you can own the house, but you can't own the property. And so if you can't do that, they won't let you sell to who you want to sell. It's a real nightmare out here. There's a whole lot of problems to be addressed, and it's going to take some tough legislators in Juneau to start sorting through the problems and saying, hey, look, you're going to have to start changing things around out there. The worst thing probably that transpired and is going to be the hardest part for the two villages right now is the theft of the PFD. And what that theft of the PFD does to you is when a village tries to get village safe water brought in by the federal government, they look at your census numbers and the village numbers, and they have to have a set amount of money income coming for a household, so that the federal government goes, hey, if we're going to invest 30-40 million in water sewer pipes and a new plant, actually probably closer to 100 million, we have to know that you can afford to pay at least $100-120 a month to keep your services going, because we're going to build it, but we're not going to pay for it. And the only way that a lot of these villages ever got running water and sewer was because they had full PFDs, and those full PFDs counted into your yearly income. Now with the PFDs gone, these villages that never got hooked up or never got any services because big places like Bethel were sucking up the money, they're absolutely has-had. There's no way that the feds are going to come in and take care of any of this because there's no income. They stole the income. Yeah. The legislature stole the income from the people, even to have a healthy household with sanitation. The legislature stole that from everybody out here. I mean, it's our money. It's not the state's money.
Right.
And that's the way I look at the PFD.
Well, Willie, we hope you stay warm and safe out there. And I don't know that there's a lot that we can do here, being in more urban Alaska, if there's anything we can do to help out there. But we're watching from afar and hoping that these folks are found safe, and that there can be some way, like I said, I don't know if there has to be a mass, winter migration of folks into other communities like Bethel or into Anchorage or something just for the winter so they can get through, because again, timing wise, I don't know if there's enough time to fix this, but we'll keep our eyes on it, and we appreciate you giving us your firsthand experience, and I hope that you do okay here in the next couple weeks as things get ready for winter out there.
Well, thank you very much, and I really enjoyed my time. And I'm an old tough survivor. I won't have a problem. It'll be the people with young kids that have the toughest problems out here. Yeah. But I think look out Anchorage. I think you're going to get a huge influx of people from the villages, and it'll probably be one of the better things economically for the state. There might be a silver lining in this cloud yet.
Yeah. All right, Willie. Well, we appreciate you coming out, and thank you for sounding off and telling us what's going on out there. We appreciate you being part of it today.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much. All right, folks. I mean, I can't imagine everything being underwater, losing all that stuff with winter just around the corner. My hat is off to those folks out there living in those areas. We'll see if we can get some more info on this as the week progresses here. We got to go, though. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll be back with more in just a moment.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, we're in the break right now. We are coming back and talking about this. So far, the only good the only good comment that I've seen so far is from Harold is Willie could set up a GoFundMe and he'd throw a few bucks in for him. Other than that, he doesn't like anything that Willie had to say. I mean, I would just say, Harold, that, Willie he's out there. He's been living out there for 30 years, and he kind of probably has a better idea of what's going on than most people. I know you're not happy with it, but that's just the way it is, man. And quite honestly, he does have a point as far as the difference between a subsistence and a subsidized lifestyle. There's a difference. And this is something that we've talked about on the program over the years, and we don't address it often, but again, that was always my fear, is that we've gone from being an independent group of people living a subsistence type lifestyle to a dependent group of people who have now become dependents of the state and the government to be able to live. And that's what it breaks my heart in these kind of situations, is that, if you become so dependent on the government that, everything that you have is then tied to them and you have to go back to them hat in hand every time, that's the problem. So he's not wrong as far as the dependency state of what's happening out there. And, I don't know if this is the time to really discuss that, because these folks are going through a lot of problems, but in the future, it should be something that we bring up and talk about, because, people who should be independent, ruggedly minded, subsistence type life, livers out there have instead become more dependent on that government spending in the largesse. And as they've taken things like the PFD, they've become even more dependent on it. And that's the problem. That's the problem. Oh, please get educated. Okay, Harold. I mean, I know none of us are as smart as you, but, I've only been watching this for 35 years. So, what's my opinion? Apparently, I am the wrong type of person to be able to offer my opinion on this. But again, I can just say from a systemic standpoint, that when their independence is slowly eroded and taken away and they become dependent instead of independent, that's a problem. That's part of the problem. 95% of the state budget, including the PFD, came from rural Alaska. But the state is the one that's taking it all. The state the state gets all that money. The people are not getting the money. And that's part of the problem. That's part of the problem. All right. Rick said, sorry, I can't see what Harold is saying because I got sick of his crap a long time ago. And just apparently he just blocked him. So apparently that's a thing, but again, I wouldn't, I want these people to be as independent and subsistence oriented as they can be without being dependent on the government. And that's what's happened. That's what happens with government dependence. It slowly takes away and erodes your ability to be free and to be independent. And then you create multiple generations of people who now expect it instead of wanting to do it on their own. And that's a problem. That's the problem. So, that's the frustrating part. And these folks, man, I'm watching these videos. There's been several videos that were floating around, including one from Kipnook last night that I saw, that is just astonishing. You have no idea what you're talking about. Harold, look, I don't have to live in a community or live amongst a group of people to be able to look on the outside and at least in general overview, see what's going on. If you don't think that the people who are living in many of these rural areas have become dependent on the government, you're not being intellectually honest with yourselves. And you keep going on and on about how the native corporations are this or that. Where are the native corporations in taking care of all their folks? Right? I mean, right? I'm just, I don't have to be part of the community to at least be able to get, like I said, an overview from outside to see what's going on. I can at least take a peek and say, that's going to be tough because you're ceding some of your independence by agreeing to whatever government largesse is from. It's a problem. All right. We're about to rejoin here, jump back into this, the Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll continue here, and make sure you like and share, follow, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that kind of stuff. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Let's do this. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Okay. Let's continue on here, and we'll see where things go from here. This storm warning is still continuing, and we'll continue our discussion throughout the week as we look at what the ramifications are for this big storm, the remnants of the typhoon smashing into the West Coast. And we'll check back in here in a week or so with Willie and company and find out what it's like out there. But I mean, I just can't imagine right now coming into winter and having something like this happen. It's got to be one of the most devastating things that's possible out there. So we'll keep those guys in our thoughts and prayers right now, and be watching to see what the solutions are when this all comes about. Wanted to get into a couple of the headlines here before we're going to be joined by Kevin McCabe here at the top of the hour. He's going to come on board, and we're going to chat with him about schools and what's going on in the schools right now. But I did want to get into this story a little bit because this is such a weird thing that's going on with Adam Crum as the former revenue commissioner. This kind of this story that popped up, and I don't know if you guys have heard about it or not, but in the days before he left the governor's office, in the days before he left and resigned as the commissioner of revenue, he committed $50 million in state funds from the constitutional budget reserve to invest in digital infrastructure in a firm that does digital infrastructure. And what's weird about it is the constitutional budget reserve is supposed to be like a low yield, low risk kind of thing. That's kind of the investments that the CBR is supposed to be part of. And this Digital Bridge stuff, the infrastructure firm that he invested in is more of a higher yield, higher return, but again, more volatility or more instability. Now, Crum said that the governor himself and the top attorneys in the Department of Law, I don't know if that means Treg Taylor or not, as the attorney general, were aware about his investment plans. According to the spokesperson, they said in an email that Crum had informed the governor's office of his plan, but the gal who is the spokesperson for the DOR said that she declined to answer when exactly the governor was informed. The governor's office, quote, cautioned that any investments made need to be in accordance with established investment policies and procedures. Now, why exactly 50 million? I mean, what were they trying to do? What's the attempt here? Why was this going on? Nobody knows. nobody really knows what's, there's been no word as to why this was so important to have it happen a week before he left office. The $50 million investment, said Crum, was to resume a practice first initiated by lawmakers more than 20 years ago, investing some funds from the CBR into a sub-account with a goal of yielding higher returns than might be feasible to obtain with other money in the budget reserve fund, assuming that the funds would not be needed for at least 5 years. So that $50 million is essentially locked up for 5 years. But no real reason why they could do that. Was this a test? Was it some kind of, could we make it happen? I don't know. But there was no response from the Department of Law. And when they were asked if Treg Taylor reviewed the investment proposal, he's since resigned, of course, and is running for governor as well. But this is so weird. I don't know what exactly is going on here. What exactly were they trying to accomplish? Digital Bridge, which is in Florida, has assets about $106 million. And according to Crum's public calendar and the ADN, he met with the Digital Bridge executives 4 times in November of last year, including a meeting in which both Dunleavy and the Alaska Gasline Development Corp. President Frank Richards were invited. There was the spokesman for the governor didn't respond and say, did the governor actually attend, or whether there was potential investments discussed there. Crum said Digital Bridge is interested in Alaska for a lot of things. They've come up here a lot. However, he said the $50 million he committed to the firm was not intended for in-state investment. Again, this is just weird. The whole thing is like, what is going on? Why did this happen? No real answer that I can find in any of the discussions of what he was trying to accomplish specifically with his $50 million, other than to try and open up this new sub-account to, I guess, make a better return. But the whole thing smells hanky as hell. It really does. Especially since it took place just a few days before he left office, and then was kind of a surprise. It was an auditor that found all this information. That's kind of the weird part of this whole deal. So I don't know. I mean, I have more questions than answers at this point, but definitely makes me scratch my head. Let's put it that way. All right, we're coming up on hour 2. Kevin McCabe is going to be joining us. We're going to be talking about his latest piece in The Watchman, which is talking about education funding. And not just funding, but the schools in general. And how do we fix what's busted at this point? We'll be back with more of The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. If you got to go for the day, please be kind, love one another, live well. Otherwise, we'll be back with hour 2 and Kevin McCabe dead ahead. Yeah, it's things that make you go, says Greg. Kevin says it's for higher returns. Yeah, it I mean, I guess, but I mean, just for the 50 million, I mean, I don't know. Was it a test run? I just want to know. Was it a test run? Yeah, the storm pretty hard on the Spit. I mean, there's a lot of stuff washed away on a couple of the boardwalks, and yeah, the storm reached all the way out here. It was kind of nasty and windy. But yeah, it's an interesting thing here. All right. Terry says it's another reason that good reason that Crum should not be governor. No trust. I just kind of want to know what was the impetus for this and why wasn't it? I mean, you'd think that they would hit it with bells and whistles and everything else. and say if it was something great and groovy that they do it with trumpets and fanfare instead of quietly signing it and sending it off. It makes me wonder who's supporting, should we be checking APOC reports? Should we be looking to see who's contributing to what's going on? So we'll see. All right. Let's get this squared away here. Less damage on the spit than normal, says Greg. I saw some of the pictures and it was pretty was not nearly like it was last year. Boy, it just peeled up the pavement on the spit and did all that, washed all that sand and foundation out from underneath some of those other buildings. Yeah, that was some crazy stuff last year on the spit. Not nearly as bad as it was last year for sure. All right, let's let me go over here and get things squared away. We'll check in with Kevin to see how he's doing this morning and see if he's washed away as well. Good morning, my friend. How are you?
Good morning, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing good. You're hopefully you're high and dry there over the.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're pretty high up on a hill, so it's although we're not dry this morning, it's been raining pretty significantly. But I'd like to say a special good morning to Harold. I'm glad that you're here, Harold, so that you can debate his former cargo pilot on education. It's awesome. Yeah, no, I love it that, because, if we have to do a litmus test on everybody that's in Juneau doing things based on what their profession is, we're going to have a problem with some of these things for sure. So, absolutely. All right. We are, ready to go here. I just wanted to double check to make sure your audio is good. So I'll put you back in the in the green room there, and you can hang out, and we'll get back to it here in just a second. Let me see if what other comments there are. Sourdough Steel says if it sounds like a duck and swims like a duck. I mean, talking about the Crumb investment thing, it's weird. I mean, again, I don't know. Brian asks, is he buying some influence and credibility and creds streak? I don't know. Again, maybe we should be checking the whole APOC thing when we go down to it. Scrolling backwards. Terry asks, how is Crumb personally invested in this company? I mean, that's a good question. Is he? I don't know. Brian says, I can give you a list of names to watch for on the Crumb APOC reports. Well, that's good. Brian's keeping track of it. The timing of the storm is terrible, says Rick. I agree. But that's, again, that's, when is it disasters? When are disasters not terribly timed at that point? Let's see. MD, you're wasting your breath speaking on his comments, playing into his hands. He's talking about Harold. I don't comment on every one of them, but sometimes it just makes me roll my eyes. Just makes me roll my eyes. That's the thing. Scrolling backwards here. There's a lot of verbosity going on here during the thing. Chris says, it sounds like the village needs to move to Bethel and only go back for the summer, says Chris. I mean, again, I don't even know if that would fix it, because again, you'd have to come back and it'd be destroyed. If it comes back and it's wrecked for the whole summer, it's such a challenge. This goes back to some of the things that we've talked about in the, on the East Coast, where they've got all these places where people are building in hurricane zones and everything else, and they just keep rebuilding it because the government keeps bailing it out. That kind of behavior wouldn't happen if the government didn't keep bailing it out, right? This is the dependency mode again, where, sure, it's a great place to live right up to the point where the hurricane wipes your place out, but don't worry, the government will pay for it again, and then you can just go back to it makes no sense. No sense whatsoever. That's the same kind of dependency thinking that I was just talking about, only that's what's happening down in the, Florida and the whole East Coast and everything else. There shouldn't be those kind of guarantees. If you play with fire, you're gonna get burned, and it shouldn't be up to somebody else to bail you out because you're knowingly playing with fire. And I'm talking about the hurricanes and stuff like that at this point. If you're going to build in the path of a hurricane, you shouldn't be rewarded if the hurricane strikes. That's what I'm saying. Okay, here we go. We're getting ready to jump back into it. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Hour 2 is right now.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning, my friends. Welcome back to the program. We appreciate you guys coming on board and joining us on this beautiful Monday. A cloudy 48 degrees here in Homer right now. It's been wild. The weather swings have been kind of crazy around here. Of course, all that weather out in on the western side of the state. We talked about that in hour 1. Got a chance to talk with Willie Keppel, who's out just about 80 miles outside of Bethel there in Quinnahock. His experiences, he got flooded. His house got moved, and he's all flooded out as well. And talking a little bit about what's going on in those communities. It's been kind of crazy, and I hope that you guys are keeping the folks out there in Western Alaska in your thoughts and prayers, because they are going to need some help coming into this next, coming into the winter, which is, 3 weeks away out there as well. And so anyway, I hope that we have some success in helping those folks out there. But we're going to move into hour 2 here this morning, and we're going to be talking about education. Now, I have long talked about education in this state and across the country, really, as being something's fundamentally broken in education. And part of it is that we've come up on we've been using the same model that we have for the last 100 years, which is essentially a model to create workers and not necessarily thinkers. It happens. We get excels, we get standouts in everything, but overall, something's been fundamentally flawed with the education system in this country for quite a few years. People like, John Gatto and others have talked about it. There's been, endless discussions on what needs to happen. The answer is obviously not just more money, though, because I think, again, something is fundamentally flawed in the system itself, and it needs to be reexamined. Kevin McCabe, representative from up in the Big Lake area up there, recently wrote an article that came out yesterday, I believe, in the Alaska Watchman. And the article is headlined, Alaska must dismantle and rebuild our failing school systems to serve parents and kids. And I'm not going to disagree with that. I think something needs to be fundamentally changed in the way we're doing things, because what we're doing is not working. So we're going to get into that this morning with Kevin McCabe, who joins us this morning to discuss, and he comes to the program right now. Good morning, Kevin. How are you, my friend?
Good morning, Michael. How are you?
I'm high and dry right now, which is, I guess, good compared to a lot of the other folks out there in Western Alaska. Feeling pretty blessed as far as that goes. All right, Kevin. Well, let's start our conversation here in talking about education, because, like I said, something is fundamentally wrong, not just in Alaska, but across the country. We spend more than most other industrialized nations in the world, and yet our scholastic achievement and our results are consistently pretty poor comparatively to the international stage. And Alaska, specifically inside of the national numbers, does pretty poorly as well. And you jump into this here, and you start off with that in your article. Walk us through here what you've got going on.
Yeah, well, I wrote an article. This is sort of this one that you're talking about, or that we're talking about. I wrote on Saturday night and Sunday morning early, and sent it to the Watchman. And it kind of became part two of two articles that I did. The first one I did last week, which was talking about the what they call the education funding task force that was born out of the override of the governor's veto of HB 57. And so HB 57 in it had yet another task force that we're supposed to, the legislature is supposed to use to sort of look at education funding and a better path forward. And all that is good, except we haven't changed anything. We're still doing the same old thing and expecting different results. So I noticed on the October 30th meeting, the people that they had listed for invited testimony, and there is no public testimony listed, were just, it was a former deed commissioner. It was the Alaska Council of School Administrators. It was AML. It was all of the stakeholders. I hate that word as much as everybody else, but it was all of the sort of the stakeholders, except it wasn't the parents and it wasn't the children. So,
well, it's industry. It's not stakeholders really. It's industry insiders, right? It's education industry insiders. That's who were there testifying.
Right. Although they've become stakeholders because they're the ones that get the money. The kids don't. So when I looked at that list, my question to Angie, to my chief of staff, and to my wife was, well, where's the representation for the kids? Who represents the kids and the parents on this? So I wrote a piece about that and was kind of critical of it. And then on Saturday, Lynn and I went to David Boyle's Alaskans for Personal Freedom conference, maybe 300 people there. And one of the talks was from a lady named Leslie Heiner, who was an attorney and I think was part of the Espinoza v. Montana Supreme Court case. And she kind of had a presentation, and on that presentation, one of those slides kind of triggered me. And it was the one that said it also talked about a Supreme Court case called Pierce versus the Society of Sisters. And in that, the court said the fundamental theory of liberty upon which all governments in this union repose excludes any general power of the state to standardize its children by forcing them to accept instruction from public teachers only. And then it goes on and says, the child is not the mere creature of the state. Those who nurture him and direct his destiny have the right, coupled with the high duty, to recognize and prepare him for the additional obligations. And I read that and I got to thinking and kind of thought about it all the way home, and so I got up Sunday morning and kind of wrote a piece. And what I'm hopeful that this piece will do is trigger parents or help parents to realize that they have got to get involved. It's frustrating to me that the Education Funding Task Force, in the interim, when nobody's in Juneau, none of the legislators are, spend a bunch of money, or is going to spend money, to send legislators to Juneau, the whole task force. There's only 2 of them that live in Juneau. Send them all to Juneau to hide out in the Davis Room 106 and have a committee hearing that nobody can really attend due to the cost and the effort to get to Juneau. And my idea is, hey, we're going to be in Juneau in a couple months. Why are you going to Juneau to hold this committee hearing? Why not hold it in Anchorage, or we've already held one in Anchorage? How about doing one in Fairbanks or on the Kenai? So I was a little critical in for them doing that, but as I was writing this, I kind of got into the old 4-part idea of some of the governor's ideas, some of the ideas we've talked about on how we can fix education, and really they're not all that difficult. There's consolidating school districts. That's a must. I actually think Deed can do that by themselves. I don't know that they need legislator approval, but we need to consolidate school districts. We just do. It's a path to less government. I mean, why do they have 4 school districts on Prince of Wales Island for crying out loud?
Right. And before you get into the 4 things, and I want to, because I want to take some time and digest and expand on each of these 4 things. But the biggest thing here, and I think what you've hit on, and we just kind of glossed over a little bit, is that basically what we have right now is, and you say it, we're treating education as if it's a taxpayer funded business, right? And we talk and we jokingly say tongue in cheek about the education industrial complex, mirroring the whole military industrial complex thing, but there's truth to it, right? And you could see that in the fact that this task force is going to have all these folks in here who essentially are folks who are inside the bubble of education funding. You talk specifically about the self-licking ice cream cone, or what you call the closed loop education kabuki dance, where you've got organizations like the Alaska Council of School Administrators and the NEA and things like that, who get paid by taxpayer funds. They lobby for bigger budgets while resisting any kind of parental involvement. The districts pays monies to these organizations like the Council of School Administrators, which then again goes back to lobby for more public funds in Juneau. And then again, they often are using teachers and students as props. We see that with the red and the put the kids out there and everybody's in red and doing all this kind of stuff. But basically it's a self-lifting ice cream cone of, we take public funds to pay for these guys to go lobby for more public funds, to then go back and lobby for, you know what I'm saying? It's this self-licking ice cream cone. They're constantly using public funds to lobby for more public funds. And yet the impact of these things continues to be that we are at the tail end of the educational achievement window, right? I mean, we're down in the dumps here. 51 out of 53. And you actually go through some of the other statistics and numbers about where we're at spending wise and everything like that. Break that down for me.
Sure. And I don't know if you remember, but 5 years ago when I first started running, we were talking about education as a business and how and it was specific to the university, but K through 12 is really no different. The business of the school districts and the money that they spend and that sort of thing. And one of the things that a business does, compared to the airline industry, if you start losing ridership in a city, the city I grew up in, when the mines were running strong, we had 2 or 3 flights a day. But as the mines started closing down, we didn't need to get executives in and out. There was less and less and less traffic. So the commuter airlines finally had to cut the city off of their route because it wasn't making any money. It wasn't doing the business that it needed to do. So then now we had to drive to Duluth or drive to Minneapolis to get on an airplane. And it's because there was not enough revenue. We weren't doing what we were supposed to do, for the commuters. So compare that to the schools. And I hate to pick on the Anchorage School District, but they're the biggest target. So here we are building a $50 million Inlet View Elementary School. And yet I'm hearing that the average daily membership that was measured in October, they are down maybe another 800 kids in the Anchorage School District. So not to beat up on them, but why are we making decisions to build a new school, and yet we're going to close 2 other schools, Fire Lake Elementary and another one? I just don't understand some of the decisions. So they're not doing the business the way they should do the business of the school district, if you ask me. And they're spending other people's money, comes from us. The legislature has no seat at the collective bargaining agreement table with the teachers or with the classified employees. Yet we have to provide the money. So how does that work? The thing is, and we get hammered if we don't provide the money. Well, wait a minute. We never said you were going to get that money, just like school bond debt reimbursement or any of the other myriad things that the legislature has to provide money for, that we are not, we're not involved in the negotiation. So,
right. Well, and we're spending $18,000 to $20,000 per student on average, which is, again, it's like in the top 3 or 4 nationally. We rank dead last in reading proficiency. Only 33% are meeting the math standards. And we've got a graduation rate that's just shy of 84%, which I guess is an improvement from Palin's days when it was 74%. But still, that means that almost 1 in 4 students are not graduating. And yet the answer is, well, if we just had more money, we could keep it. And that's not, somebody has to acknowledge that there's something fundamentally busted in what we're doing if we're continuing to do that.
Sure, 100%. And who do we get to acknowledge that? If you look at the education funding task force, who is on there that will actually stand up for the students and stand up and say, this has to end. Who's going to do it? I'm not so sure. Kronk's on there. Kronk could probably do it, but he's one person. I think that the rest of them need to focus on the kids, frankly. I've said it before on this show, as a matter of fact. The districts come into my office all the time, and they talk about inflation and teacher pay and contracts and new roofs and new generators. Rarely, other than I will say that Dr. Trainee and the Matsu talks about kids, and the Matsu school board, when they come in, they talk about kids, but rarely does anybody else talk about kids, about our education. Rarely.
Well, and that's the reason we keep hearing about it is for the children. And yet we don't hear about, that was my criticism the last 18 months, is we keep hearing about the per student funding and the base student allocation and yada, yada, yada. And on the lip services, it's for the kids. But when you get down to the nitty gritty, nobody's talking about it. Nobody is talking about what the kids are doing. It's crazy. All right. We're up against the break. We're going to continue here in just a moment. Kevin McCabe is our guest. We'll be back with more. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll return with Kevin McCabe and discussions, plus his ideas for what could fix this. Because again, he's talking about dismantling and rebuilding our school system. Well, what are the actions that need to be taken? We'll get with that with Kevin here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show, because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, Kevin McCabe is our guest. Let's get into some of the comments here. I see Melissa said, where is it? She said, yes, do it in Fairbanks. Do the meeting in Fairbanks. Freaking him shoot, she says. I mean, that's the thing. Why are we holding this first meeting in the bubble of Juneau where nobody can participate? Right? I think that to me says a lot more than anything else. Because again, this is supposed to be for the kids and for parents, and this task force is supposed to pull all this stuff together, and yet it's down in Juneau. And the only people that they have testifying are people from within the education industry itself. So, I've said this from the beginning, Kevin, when they first announced who was going to be on the education task force, and all I could say was it felt like the fix was in.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with that. And part of the problem is the way the HB 57 was worded. The minority had no real input into who the single person that the House minority got to put on that committee. We had no input. Not saying anything against Representative Ruffridge at all in this, but it should have started where we had some input, where we actually picked a person that would be best on there, and maybe it would have been him. I don't know, and I'm not on that committee, and certainly I've seen it before. It started with the Fiscal Policy Working Group, which I was on my very first summer as a legislator, and I was honored to do that. But what happened from it? Nothing. We wrote a report, and Jonathan Christ Tompkins was roundly chastised by his caucus for allowing that report actually to be written in sort of a bipartisan manner, because we were in the minority and they felt like they should have squashed us, apparently. But anyways, I sort of going off on a tangent here. The committee should have been picked by the caucuses. So I'm not sure if the Senate minority picked Kronk or not, but certainly the Speaker of the House picked our committee member. So
Yeah.
it was that's the beginning of the frustration, and then you continue to see the committee under the direction of the two co-chairs, which are Senator Tobin and Representative Himshoot, to do the tone-deaf stuff like holding a meeting in Juneau in the interim when they could easily wait. We're supposed to hold meetings regularly till the end of 2027, the task force is, and get input from people. And yet here we are starting off going to Juneau in October. To me, it's just, well, it's a kabuki dance. It's window dressing that's costing us a pile of money to send legislators down there that we shouldn't be spending.
Well, it's it's justification for what they already want. That's part of the problem. But let me tell you where this is going to end up. And I think Sourdough Steel over on YouTube has got a great point here. And I think this is what is going to continually happen. Sourdough Steel says, as a parent, I did get involved. I'm homeschooling my kids. Forget these school districts and their failing children. And that's why I think you're seeing this exodus from the schools. You're seeing this declining enrollment for years. It's worse than they even anticipated. Fairbanks had the same problem. Their exodus was this last go round was what, 25-40% more than what they expected. And you're seeing that in every district because parents are getting frustrated and they're just going to keep pulling out. And it'll get to the point to where they're pulling out fast enough that you can't fix that kind of bleeding.
Right. 100%. Statistic that I didn't put in this article. I was on a Denali borough assembly meeting the other day, just listening in, and the Denali Borough School District administrator gave his report, and the population of the Denali borough is significantly smaller, say, than the Matsu or than Anchorage.
Hold on a second, Kevin. We're 15 seconds out. Let's pick this story up here on the other side. We're going to jump back into it. The Michael Duke Show continues. Kevin McCabe is our guest. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that stuff. Let's get back to it. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
We're continuing now. Kevin McCabe is our guest. He is a representative from up in the Matsu in the Big Lake area. We're talking about his article, which is available up in the Watchman right now. Alaska must dismantle and rebuild our failing school system to serve parents and kids. That's the key portion of that article. We were just talking during the break that I said one of the dangers here and the challenges is that if they don't fix what's going on, people will continue to leave. Sourdough Steel on YouTube made a comment that said, as a parent, I did get involved. I'm homeschooling my kids. Forget these school districts and their failing children. And that is the biggest danger here, Kevin, is that as more and more parents, and we saw this during COVID, they discovered it wasn't as hard to homeschool their kids or to find an alternative education for their kids as they had been told over the years. And so more and more people are pulling out. You're talking about declining enrollments. They're actually more declines, bigger declines than what the districts are even anticipating. And that's just going to continue. And you were talking about some of your experiences and some of the things that you were just finding out about the Denali Borough.
Yeah, so I mean you're exactly right, and Sourdough Steel is exactly right. He took action to vote with his feet. I mean that's the whole free market idea, right? And we've tried to push that, telling schools and school districts if your schools were actually teaching the kids and the performance was actually up to where it should be for our kids, then you wouldn't lose students and parents because they wouldn't go to the homeschooling, take the homeschooling option, and they would stay in their neighborhood schools. And frankly, it's not a slam on our teachers at all. We just need to let teachers be teachers and do what they were trained to do and what they love to do, and that's to teach our kids properly. Instead, we put all these programs in here. But that's I was kind of on the story about the Denali Borough, so I was listening to the assembly meeting, and the school district administrator said, hey, we're now over 900 homeschool students in the Denali Borough. There's not 900 kids in the borough, and it turns out that a chunk of them are from Anchorage, being homeschooled through the Denali Borough School District, to the point I think that I believe they have an office in Anchorage. So my thought was, why is that? And it's exactly what Sourdough Steel said. It's because parents are getting upset that the school district is not teaching their kids. The schools are not teaching their kids the way they're supposed to. So they're removing them and putting them in, whether it be the Denali Borough School District homeschool or Peak or the interior one, Idea or Raven. And they're putting them in homeschool and homeschooling their kids, and very successfully, I might add. There's a reason you don't hear them complaining too much anymore about homeschooling kids not being part of the NAEP test, and that's because I think that they are coming to the understanding that the homeschooling kids will be doing significantly better and sort of highlight the difference between the neighborhood schools and the school districts and homeschooling. And so anyways, that's a really good point that
right.
We're losing kids to the homeschooling. Parents are voting with their feet. And I think it's a symptom, and it's also part of the solution.
Well, and I think there's also a danger in there, because we've seen this in the various communities where they've talked about closing the schools. I saw it in the comments in the Fairbanks area when they were closing those schools. When they started talking about closing a couple schools in Anchorage, I saw a lot of the comments to where people were commenting, oh, it's those damn homeschoolers. They're taking away from our kids' education. It was kind of the reaction that some of these people had. And that's something that I think that the school districts are kind of leaning into, that they're pointing to those folks as the culprit for why we're having problems, because they didn't put their kids in our brick and mortar schools and we're losing money because of it. Not because they're doing a poor job of educating, not because it's just they're being selfish. And that's the other danger here, is kind of that ostracizing of the parents who've made the decision to homeschool their own kids or start a charter school or go be part of a learning pod or whatever, alternative teaching. They want it to be their way or the highway.
Right. 100%. And one of the things that Leslie Hinman in this presentation she did on Saturday said was, don't we start educating our kids from the day they're born as parents? Aren't we sort of 5 or 6 years into that experience, before our kids ever go to the brick and mortar or the neighborhood schools. And she's exactly right. I mean, we are the original, as parents, homeschoolers, and the idea that we should continue to do that, I think, is it has a place in our education system, and certainly they are. Homeschooling is being sort of denigrated as the problem, and maybe we need to get even deeper into why it is the problem. Why do you think school districts said homeschooling is a problem? Well, because parents are leaving. Well, why are they leaving? Well, in many cases, they're leaving because of the poor education that's coming out of the school district. And if we could fix that, maybe we would bring them back. Customer service, right? I mean,
Right. Well, there's no analysis of that, though, Kevin, right? There's no analysis. There's no exit interview for a parent to say, why are you pulling your kids from school? Why are
right.
you doing it? There's no self-awareness to say, well, what are we doing wrong? What
Right.
is, if this is not working, then what are we doing wrong? The answer is always, we don't have enough money. And like you said, with the NAEP test, maybe they're not squawking as much about the NAEP test. Fat Ray says, you can't trust those test results, Michael. You got to use the AK star test results, which show, okay, look, testing isn't important. Just pay the money, right? Because the star test, because that's what we heard. We heard, oh, the NAEP tests are wrong. And then the star test came out and they were like, you know what, those tests, they don't really matter. Just give us the money. And
Right.
that's the problem. We're going to have more and more of this, and you can't keep pushing these people out and expect that they're going to stick with you.
Right. 100%. And this is where the parental choice comes in, is I think we need to have a choice. I think neighborhood schools might be, or certainly are, part of that choice. And if they make the neighborhood schools not user friendly, but more, customer oriented, meaning kid oriented, doing the things that the kids need to bring up their scores, such as the Matsuda is doing. I think that neighborhood schools will be back in the mix, but there's charter schools, there's homeschooling. I think 6% of Alaskan kids or families, the kids aren't even listed in the school district. They're 100% going to a completely, family paid private school, whether it be a Christian school or another school. And they're not even part of the percentages or the mix that we're talking about. The 128-ish thousand kids that we have in our school, there's another 6% above that aren't even listed.
Let's talk for a minute, or let's get into your solutions. You have four solutions, and you talked about the first one, but I want to get back into it here. We'll resummate that before we go to the final break. And your first solution to dismantle the education industrial complex and rebuild it with kids and families in mind is, first and foremost, consolidate the districts. Now, most people don't understand. There are 54 school districts in the state of Alaska. Now, people would say, well, we need that because, distance and geography and education. But just for example, the state of Hawaii, which has 8 different islands spread geographically and everything else, they have one school district for the entire state. One school district for, I imagine, probably 2 or 3 times the number of kids that we have here in the state of Alaska. But you're saying 54 different districts. You said on one island alone, they have 4 districts in that one island. What most people don't understand is that each one of those districts has a superintendent, an assistant superintendent, a secretary, a procurement officer, a maintenance guy, the this, the that, the thing. I mean, it is 54 duplications of effort, 54 different positions that are filled by the same bodies, that if we could consolidate that down, it would eliminate all that duplication. Even if we could cut it in half, it would cut 23 different, basically administrations down, and that would be a tremendous savings. Talk about the consolidation.
Sure, 100%. And it just makes sense. And even today in the electronic age, where you can attend a school board meeting or an assembly meeting via Zoom, We can easily do this. One of the arguments against doing this was, well, then the parents in the this or that school district or school will have to travel to another village or another city for their school district meeting. I would submit to say out in Bethel or other places that Bethel's kind of the hub, and parents travel from the villages there anyways. And I would think that a consolidated school district of a group of like-minded villages and like-minded schools that have the same problem together is more powerful when it comes to dealing with deed and dealing with the state and dealing with the what's left of the federal Department of Education. It makes more sense to be consolidated together than it does separate. And I think electronically we can, as parents, we can always still have input and still attend meetings and still pay attention. So it just makes sense to me, but others, Angie's reminding, I had an amendment to consolidate school districts down to 30. I think, I can't remember which bill it was in, HB 69 maybe, but and it was sort of roundly defeated. It just, to me, it just, you look at that as even if you look at it as a non-educator or non-school, even you just look at that as a businessman, and it just makes sense.
Right. Well, yeah, you say in the article that if that amendment had passed, it would have reduced the number of districts to 30 by 2027 and would have saved up to 20% of the cost, the actual administrative costs. And that money could have gone directly into the classroom. An additional 20% of those monies could have gone directly into the classroom. And that's just one of the four things that Kevin's going to talk about here. We're going to continue here in just a moment. Kevin McCabe is our guest. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll be back with more in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
All right, Kevin McCabe, our guest here. Brian says, but those icky homeschooling people aren't burdening the teachers or using supplies, so there's more for both of the traditional student. Except for, of course, that money goes to the administration and they decide who gets the supplies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Let's see.
Right. That homeschooling money doesn't go directly to the parents. Only a percentage goes to the parents. The rest goes to the school district. So homeschooling is, in fact, a cash cow for some school districts.
Well, I mean, you look at what Denali, like you said, look at what Denali's doing with 900 students. Look at what Galena, the IDEA program is out of the Galena City School District. Galena does not have 5,000 students, which I think is, it's like IDEA is somewhere near the 5,000 mark as far as enrollment. 5,000 students across the state. Galena doesn't have that, but they're building a better mousetrap, and they're giving people that opportunity there. Fat Ray says, even if there was an exit interview with the parents, they would just be labeled as bigots or something, and those people won't abide sound doctrine. That's the problem, is that even if they would be like, well, I just don't like the cut of your jib, I don't like what you're teaching. Well, it must be because you're bigoted and you hate children. That's why it's going on there. Kendall Cruz in the chat room from the Matsu. She says, NAEP is known for being more rigorous than state tests. Many states lowered benchmarks in their state tests over the decades. Right. But even when the KK STAR test came out, they were like, never mind. Because they were saying the NAEP was just, it just was apples to oranges and blah, blah, blah. And then they're like, no, never mind. We didn't really mean that. Let's see. Late this morning, but really wanted to hear what Kevin had to say. So we'll listen later today. All right. Thanks, Audrey. Appreciate it. I'm sorry. California has lowered its education standards so low that you now have to have a 25% proficiency score to be considered a failing grade. 25%. I mean, is that what we want? Is that what we want? A bunch of kids who can't, read or write or do basic arithmetic coming out of school? And that's that's what we're ending up with here, Kevin.
Sure. And it's interesting, I saw a comment by Harold about the colleges and if you consider that the college is a business, they actually charge someone, students or the federal government or grants, or they charge them for schools. And now all of a sudden they're getting money for remedial math and remedial English to bring students up to college level so that they can actually attend college. So our lack of education of our children coming out of high school is actually a boon, if you will, for the university. And it's crazy to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, sure, because it's making money on remedial education. I mean, Harold was saying education is not a business. It absolutely is a business. I mean, it is almost the quintessential, they just happen to be getting their revenue from taxpayers. And they're doing everything they can to protect those revenue streams. And it's like you said, you propose this idea of consolidating school districts, and everybody says no. Why? Well, because people would lose their jobs. If you consolidated school districts, you wouldn't need 54 superintendents and then every other name on the corporate hierarchy down the tree there. You wouldn't need 54 of every one of those people. Right. If you only needed 30, that means 24 people in each one of those positions would lose their job.
Right.
And while that is tragic for them and tragic, and that's how the world works. If you're not needed, but instead, no, we've got to protect that. We've got to protect that.
And that's why I keep saying we need to get back to the focus on the kids. I had a conversation back to the Denali borough. The Anderson School is a 44,000 square foot building. It's hugely expensive, and it has maybe 10 kids in it, maybe. And one of the discussions with an assembly member up there, and very great guy, well-meaning, he said, "Hey, Kevin, if we were to close that school down and send those 10 kids to Nenana, say, which is a different school district, what would happen to the city of Anderson? Would parents start to move out because it's too difficult to get their kids to school 30 minutes away? Would we lose those 6 families that provide those 10 kids for the school?" And kind of made me think, there is ramifications that we certainly need to think about before we would do something like that. And also, in a place like Anderson with the temperatures and that kind of stuff, you have to winterize the building, and it's expensive to sort of put it in storage. So fortunately, the mayor up there is very, very good at finding that other alternative uses for the building, whether it be housing the firefighters in the summer or putting the city offices in that building and trying to consolidate again to save money. And those are the kind of creative things that we need to get to.
Yeah, because technology is making a lot of this stuff is changing, right? The technology is changing to where we don't need the same brick and mortar type schools that we did. And we've got to adapt to that. We've got to adapt or die. And that's the problem, is that we are refusing and failing. We always want to do things the way we've always done them, because otherwise somebody might lose a job.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Okay, continuing now, Kevin McCabe, our guest. We were talking about the 4 things that could be done to dismantle and rebuild the school system. Number 1 was consolidating districts. We just got through that. All right, let's talk about number 2, Kevin. Expanding choice. What does that mean to you?
Sure, and this is one of Governor Dunleavy's sort of flagship ideas is parental choice, school choice, if you want to talk about it by another name. But what that does is what we talked about in the last segment, which it allows parents to vote with their feet. So if they get If they get to a school that is underperforming for their children, then they can move to another school. They can move to a charter school. Or if they see that their child has an aptitude for music or welding or German languages, they can move to a charter school very easily. Or in our highly commutable society, I think 80% I heard of the employees in Anchorage live in the Valley right now. If you wanted to be able to drive your child to school and not, and the school was one that you were interested in Anchorage, you could move between the Mat-Su-Borough School District and the Anchorage School District and drop your child off at school in Anchorage on your way to work and pick them up on the way home. So there's so many creative ideas that we can think about for school and for education and for our kids, that this would be, in my opinion, is a important idea that we need to sort of get to for parents.
Right. And one of the problems that we're having right now is that school choice is being made very difficult by the education establishment itself, because again, I think they feel like they're losing control, right? They want to be able to. So anytime you want to talk about parents coming together, and we're always complaining about how parents aren't involved enough, right? We're not involved, but we get parents who are come together and they want to form, say, a charter school, that's specialized either like music or, like you said, an immersion school or whatever. They have to go back to the education complex, the industrial complex, and beg their permission to do it. And of course, they have no incentive to do that because it takes kids out of their ledger, and they lose money on it. And so they're antithetical to that. And one of the things that the governor was asking for was a secondary body to be able to authorize that. So you're not at the mercy of that, of the self-interest of the education industry.
Right. And, I keep hearing this thing about how the authorizers need to be, the local control idea. We don't want to have a state authorizing board because it's not local control. But what is more local control than having the parents involved in a charter school? So charter schools don't happen without parental involvement. They just don't. The parents have a board. The parents, it's more than a PTA. It's less than a school board. But the parents are highly involved in charter schools. In fact, I had a conversation with David Boyle this weekend, Saturday night at dinner, and we were talking about the Rilke Schule School, which is the highly regarded German immersion school in Anchorage. My granddaughter actually graduated from there and got a fabulous, education before she went to high school. And they're sort of being moved around by the Anchorage School District, who seems to be want to make it harder for them to actually do the education that parents want in that school. So there was I think a school around Lake Hood somewhere that was closing, and it was designed for 450 people, almost exactly 450 kids, almost exactly the number of kids that Rilke Schule has enrolled. And instead of putting the Rilke Schule school in there, they put a different charter school in that building that had much less kids, and they farmed the Rilke Schule school out to a much smaller school. So they're making business decisions that just don't make sense sometimes. And maybe that's why the Mat-Su is doing so well under Dr. Trainee, is because he makes decisions based on what's best for our children, period. There is no other consideration. And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, it just, to me, it just, if you focus on your customers, which are the kids, they got to be the customers. Instead, we're just treating them as the means to get funding, really. So if you focus on your customers, I think things just sort of fall into place. But
the third choice is the third item on your list here of the four is implement education savings account. Now, we've been seeing this across the country, and it's, 13 states now are providing universal choice. It's something that we need to be able to offer folks.
Sure, and we've talked about that. You and I have talked about that since I ran. Backpack funding, or the funding follows a child, and it's just another way that gives parents the choice to be able to move their children around. And that Espinosa v. Montana decision was sort of part of that, right? So we have got to figure out a way inside our Constitution, or change the Constitution and get rid of that partial Blaine amendment that's in there. We have got to figure out a way that allows more parent choice. So my third is sort of tied to the second one as well. Same idea. It's just more parental choice, more family choice for education.
And the fourth one is the big one, because this is all about accountability, meritocracy, being paid for what you're delivering. And that's the one thing that's been missing from the school systems, is that it doesn't matter if they deliver a substandard product or not, they're all still getting paid. And your idea is demand accountability.
Right, 100%. And isn't that what we want? Don't we want the highest return on our investment we can possibly get? Because we're investing in the most important resource in our state, which is our children. So we should be able to get the highest amount of return on our investment that we possibly can. And it's, I hate to say it this way, but it's for the kids. When are we going to focus on the kids? I've been saying that for years. We have got to focus on the kids, and we're just not doing it.
And of course, that would mean that we should be auditing non-classroom spending, mandate PEHT financial disclosures, give the legislature a seat at the table during any contract negotiations, because the legislature's paying the bill.
Right. And that's when in the contract negotiations is when you sit there across from the unions and you say, well, wait a minute, you want 15% pay raise, and yet our children's education is in the basement. How are we going to fix that? Let's get on board together and fix that for our children. And then certainly if you need, if there's a pay raise involved, then absolutely. But, it's got to be part of any negotiation to me. So.
Final 2 minutes here, Kevin. So final thoughts on dismantling and rebuilding the education system.
Yeah, part of the issue as well, I don't know if you've ever read Emily Schwing. She wrote a really good piece on REAA schools. So it turns out that the state owns 57 of those schools outright. We have the pink slip to it, the state does. And there is a $9 billion infrastructure when she added it up. And I haven't done the research on that myself. I'm just going off her article, but there's a significant number of schools that need major maintenance. Some of them black mold, some of the roofs are falling in, and some of the classrooms that can't even use anymore. So how is it that we have allowed that as a state with the major school maintenance fund that we, when we were in the majority, we funded the top 15 projects, I think. This last time they funded 3, and some of those were even vetoed. And that's very, very political. I think we need to get the politics out of this, and we need to provide a safe place. And it's one of the reasons that some of the folks overrode the governor's veto, is because their schools and their school districts are screaming for the money that they need to fix their problem. And maybe the BSA is not the best place to obtain that money.
Right.
Maybe we need to do a better job of finding a better way to fund maintenance, maybe transportation, maybe even energy, and remove that from the BSA and tie the BSA more tightly just to student outcomes with our teachers. So
Kevin McCabe, our guest, thank you so much for coming on board. Folks, we're out of time. Tomorrow, Brad Keithley, Chris Story. Be kind, love one another, live well. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day. All right, Kevin, sorry I had a hard break there. So I'll let you finish your I'll let you finish it. But yeah, $9 billion in deferred maintenance for state-owned buildings.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I mean, and I don't know how this became political, where we own the building, we spent the money to build it, we own it, that should just be like, it's not even a question. It should just be a pass-through, right? I mean, that should be part of, when you build a building, there should be a fund set aside for that building, and money just goes into it every year to maintain it. and it's attached to that building. It can't be drawn out for anything else, and it just fixes the building. That's what we need to do.
Yeah, 100%. And it's unfortunate that it's those schools and those school districts have had to start relying on the BSA to provide for their heating, to provide for their building. Maybe that's part of what could come out of this task force, is how remove that funding, in whether it be a different fund or I think the major school maintenance fund was designed to do that, but unfortunately that's become political. So, but we have got to get back to somehow having a school funding, BSA funding, that focuses just on the kids and on the classrooms. So, the governor's got several different ways to do it. I've got some ideas in there, and hopefully the task force comes up with some ideas. And frankly, hopefully the legislature can actually find their way to following them instead of, putting it on the shelf like we've done with other task force, whether it be PFD or fiscal policy or.
Yeah, no, that's part of the problem. Everything has become so politicized. Again, if you just attach it to each building and say, this is how much is in this fund, and it needs to, and if it grows every year, great. There'll just be, keep funding. But you can't build these buildings and just expect that they're, that the political whims are going to keep them functional. That's right. That's part of the problem. Yep. That's part of the problem right now. All right. Anything else, Kevin, before I let you go?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to come on here and talk about this. I would say that the sort of clarion call at the bottom of my article, hopefully some parents or one parent or more will read it and actually write to the task force and put your thoughts in there. I think it's extremely important that parents start to become more engaged and have some input. I don't disagree with removing your kids and homeschooling them. That sends a certain message, but I think reinforcing that message with a letter to the task force is probably important.
Yeah, no, I think that having your voice be heard is definitely important. Posting a link up again to the article in the chat room there, and he's given the information if you want to contact the education task force. This is the place to do it. Well, Kevin, thank you for putting into words a lot of what we've been saying here on the program for a long time, and hopefully somebody's listening, because something has got to change. We can't keep doing things the way we've been doing them and expect different results at this point. So appreciate you coming on board. Thank you for being part of it today.
You bet, Michael. Talk to you later.
All right, my friend. Thank you so much. Okay, folks, that does it for us. We are out of time. Guys, be kind, love one another, live well. I guess, just be grateful that we're where we're at. At least we're not flooding out underneath of us and all that kind of stuff. Just keep your prayers out for those people out west. Hope that they get squared away before winter. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. We will see you guys tomorrow. Be kind, love one another, live well.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.